just wanted to say thank you to all the people who have helped make this week of webinars a success. We have been running Stop Adult Abuse Week across the region for nearly 10 years, and since 2020 we have moved to webinars which have been a real success. Everyone who has run these events has done so for free, as they recognise the importance of sharing their learning, their experience and their time to support some of the most at-risk people in our communities. I especially want to thank those who have shared some of their personal experiences and their own vulnerabilities. It has been really appreciated. Lastly, thank you to all of you for your attendance and participation. So my name is Claire Hayward. I'm the chair of the Participation, Engagement and Communication Group, which sits under the Keeping Bristol Safe Partnership Executive. The group is made up of participation workers, and our aim is to support all the other working groups and task and finish groups to include the voice of the citizens of Bristol. Before I run through our webinar and introduce you to the main presenters, I would just like to do some housekeeping. We welcome any questions for the speakers. Rather than putting your hand up and stopping while we wait for people to come off mute, please could you add them to the chat. Please be aware that anything you do write in the chat will be visible to all participants. There is an option in Teams to use captions or subtitles. Just in case you are new to Teams, this is available within the settings function and accessibility. These can be switched on by each individual user and only you will be able to see the captions. They do not appear for the whole group. As I mentioned at the start, the session is being recorded and a link to the recordings will be made available in the next few weeks through the Keeping Bristol Safe Partnership website, but your local Safeguarding Adult Board will also have the links to send out. There will be an evaluation form at the end of the session, which I hope will magically appear in the chat during the last 5 minutes. If you would kindly complete this before leaving, it will be much appreciated. And those of you who have already done this throughout the last few sessions will know it takes less than a minute to complete. So on to the plan for today's webinar. We will start by just explaining what the Keeping Bristol Safe Partnership is doing in terms of hearing the voice of the people it serves and how it is working towards including them in decision making. In a bit, I will ask you to identify and share via Slido some of the systemic barriers to participation and inclusion. We will go through a project completed in response to a Safeguarding Adult review, which looks at how well the system is embedding the principles of making safeguarding personal. We will then hear via a film commission from members of our Domestic Abuse Forum as to their experiences. We would like to finish with some helpful ideas from research as to how we may work to overcome some of the systemic barriers to participation. But before we raise your expectations, we do not have a magic wand. We can, however, refresh some key principles for you to bear in mind. Throughout, if you do have comments, examples of good practice, either in your area or elsewhere, or specific questions, please add them to the chat. And if we do not have time to go through them at the end, then we will attempt to address them afterwards. Finally, before I introduce my colleagues, I just want to make you aware that the slides will be available afterwards to participants. So with me today is Jennifer Wills. Jenny, do you want to have a quick wave? Who is the Participation Project Officer jointly funded by the Partnership and Public Health to support participation and undertake specific projects. She is also the lived experience lead across the partnership. Also today we have Michelle Farr. Hi Michelle, who is a research fellow at Bristol University who works for the National Institute of Health and Care Research Applied Research Collaboration West. The three of us support a newly formed trustee group of adults who either have support needs or have family who required support and have experience of safeguarding in one form or another. This group is charged with holding the partnership to account in terms of their inclusion of the community, but also to support the work of the partnership where they have experience or links within their communities. There is also a shadow board, a shadow safeguarding children's board, who complete project work like secret shopping and hold a children's board to account. The Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Forum, who have as part of their work produced the video we will see later. and the drug and alcohol lived experience work, which is supported by grant funding through an external provider, whose aim is to strategically inform our decision making. The drug and alcohol group is in response to the new government strategy From Harm to Hope. So if we move on to the next slide. Throughout the session, we would really like it if you could let us know either via the chat or using Slido as to barriers faced when attempting to include lived experience and the voice of the user in your work. And we will look at results a bit later. For those who have not used Slido before, either use your phone with a QR code or go onto the internet to www.slido.com. At the top, it will ask if you are joining as a participant and will ask you to enter the code. In this box, simply type the 2228969. I will add the address and code to the chat so we can move on, and I can hand over to Jen Wills. Over to you, Jen.
Jen, I think you're still on mute at the moment.
Thanks, Michelle. Rookie error there. So a report into service users' experience of involvement in their own care plans was undertaken by myself. Speaking to and interviewing people directly, I will take this time to explore the recommendations with you and ask you to reflect on your own service and how it is inclusive of service users in their own care plans and wider design of services. The Safeguarding Adults document, Advice and Guidance to Directors of Adult Social Services, states, unless people's lives are improved, then all the safeguarding work, systems, procedures and partnerships are purposeless. Currently, directors and safeguarding adult boards are faced with a plethora of input-output data, but no way of telling from it if they are really making an impact. Directors must have a means of knowing what works and how they are making a difference to people. So the background to this report was that Christopher passed away in December 2015, aged 31. The Safeguarding Adults review that was published in relation to Christopher's death had a number of recommendations. The Making Safeguarding Personal report was in response to the following recommendation. To improve person-centred care so that adults' views are sought and are central to decision-making. Where adults have additional communication needs, professionals should use communication aids and tools and not rely on verbal communication to seek these. In Christopher's case, this would have been particularly helpful in respect of discussions about nutrition. You can find the full review on the Keeping Bristol Safe Partnership website, and there'll be a link to this at the end of the presentation. So whilst undertaking this report, a list of 29 service users was given to myself by Adult Social Care. Only 6 were interviewed. 10 social workers did not respond to the request. 2 social workers had left the local authority and not placed an auto response on their emails for a named worker. 3 service users did not respond to requests to meet after social workers had passed on the service users' contact details. 1 service user was in hospital. 2 social workers felt that their service users lacked capacity and it wasn't appropriate. 1 service user had died 2 weeks prior. 1 service user had moved out of area due to racial abuse. And 2 service users had not had social care engagement for over a year. It took a lot of time to contact the social workers and the service users to establish appropriate times and dates to meet in person. There was a great deal of value in meeting service users in person to elicit conversations. As you can see, there was a variety of care and support needs experienced by the service users I met during this piece of work. The report highlighted 10 recommendations. As we talk through these, we would like you to think about how these recommendations are reflected in your own service and would like you to share best practice examples in the chat. So, recommendation 1. Out of 29 service users, only 6 were interviewed. Recommendation 1 comes from the gaps in recording that were observed and the difficulties in obtaining participants to undertake the report. What we'd like you to think about is, within your organisation, what have been your barriers to cases being closed? Why do services not know about deaths? Are friends and family checking in? And if they're not, are they communicating with social care and other agencies? Recommendations 2 and 3 arose because of the statements participants made about plans not being reviewed and their lack of awareness of plans being made. What we'd like you to think about are whether plans are being reviewed regularly, and if not, why not? Do you know what the statutory requirements are within your service around review procedures? Are families and friends being asked for updates? Do families and friends know the escalation procedure if they are not being provided updates? Have the service users' needs changed or not? And if not, why not? Recommendation 4 was created due to needing more information about our systems and how information is recorded. We'd like you to think about your service. Are audits of recording of plans being regularly undertaken in your service? How easy is this to do? Who is auditing your services and ensuring this internal auditing is taking place? How often is your database and IT training refreshed? Do you get training in how to write a support plan? What other training does your service require to ensure support plans are effective and staff have the confidence to challenge when necessary? Recommendations 5 and 6 arose around training in professional curiosity, modern slavery and exploitation. This was due to a participant having experienced modern slavery and grooming, but services stated that they were unwilling to engage whilst the perpetrator was preventing the engagement. What we'd like you to think about is what is the offer for training locally around non-engagement, self-neglect, modern slavery and exploitation? What is the training offer around professional curiosity? What are the barriers to professionals being curious? Have a think about how your service overcomes the barriers of time, knowledge, intuition, vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue. Recommendation 7 is with regards to prison leavers. One of the participants was in prison. When I met with them to discuss their experience of adult social care, they stated that there was a big difference in the support they got inside prison to when they left. They felt that if they had received more support outside of prison, then they wouldn't have reoffended. We know that the number of prison leavers with defined care and support needs are low. However, there are gaps in continued support once they leave, and this increases the likelihood of reoffending. Why is there such a gap in support for prison leavers? What links are there between adult social care and our criminal justice system to prevent reoffending? We currently have a trustee looking to do some work with myself around this and supporting in this project. This also links in with the Stephen Bubb report on building rights. There is also ongoing work in Bristol around the continuity of care for people who have used drugs and alcohol and are leaving prison as part of the public health approach. Recommendation 8 is about transitional safeguarding. This recommendation came from one of the participants who had physical needs with a teenage son who was being criminally exploited, but was also abusive towards his parent. We know that there is a gap in provision for support for young adults aged 18 to 25, and the difference in support and accessibility to support is great compared to children's services. We know that transitions-aged young adults are at higher risk of both criminal and sexual exploitation. We would like you to think about what is happening locally to you around transition safe services. How do you support young adults within your service as they continue into early adulthood? As we think about transitions-aged young people, I'd like to show you this video by the Listening Partnership. The Listening Partnership is a space facilitated by Wessel for young people who have learning and physical difficulties and disabilities. The message that the video sends is important to consider for those young people entering adulthood and how these experiences are shared with our adults too.
Keep a job. ALPI is a forum group for young people with special educational needs and disabilities. It's a group of disabled young people who experience barriers in society.
ALPI is a disabled forum where a group of young people meet every week to chat about problems affecting disabled young people and give them a voice. We talk about stuff like affecting our lives, like finding it difficult to attend work and college.
We want to give underrepresented people a voice.
We give disabled young people different opportunities that they find hard to access, including DFE, trips and projects. Things I like about LP are seeing my friends and all the staff. Also, I enjoy getting on with work and socialising.
We have done lots of new things. We have travelled to London to see the House of Parliament. We have spoken at our conferences and I have got more confidence in myself.
I like coming because I have made really good friends, and also I can openly talk with my mates because they will listen and I can trust them.
Being part of a group is making me feel safe and proud. Also, I have made really good friends at LP. I like to chat openly with my friends and all the staff.
As part of LP, we have the opportunity to participate in the Duke of Edinburgh Award. Bristol support LP through the DOV to focus on any support that we may need to be fully included and complete our award. Before I started my DOV expedition, I experienced lots of discrimination. However, that only pushed me to prove people wrong. Thanks to LP offering me this opportunity, I had one of the best weekends of my life.
Poor mental health can be invasive. It can change your entire personality. It makes it difficult to find and keep a job, to live independently and to stop being bullied. There is not enough professional help out there, and it takes so long to get it that sometimes it's too late. In LP, we are supported with our mental health by our friends and staff members. Together, we are working towards improving mental health services for disabled young people, changing perceptions and removing stigma.
Mental health is invisible. If your mental health is poor, you can feel a lack of confidence. It makes it difficult to make friends. And you can become isolated. We all suffer times of poor mental health.
Not all disabilities are visible, some are invisible. Autistic people are judged harshly. Autism can be affected by everyone and anything. I wish I could get a break from being disabled for the weekend, because it's really stressful and tiring. People do not get us. They say they can relate to us when they can't. For example, people say they can understand what PDA feels like. I don't think they do. I say things like I find it really hard to get up in the mornings, and they say stuff like me too, as if it's the same situation, but it's not. Small things can affect disabled young people in such different ways.
Some people find noise difficult. I don't always understand what people are saying. It makes you vulnerable.
We are bullied and we want it to stop. Disabled young people face daily bullying, and for some it has gone on for a long time. We are bullied purely because we walk, talk, look and sound different. We are bullied everywhere, but most of all we are bullied in school or college. We need to help people who have been bullied to speak up for themselves, but most of all we need bullying to stop.
At LP we are supported by each other and the staff to voice our own opinions and experiences. We aim to change society around issues that we face as disability young people. Bullying happens anywhere just because we are different, and we want to see things change.
What does LP mean to us?
Fun, flippin-tastic.
Positive.
Kind.
Polite.
Accepting.
Inspiring.
Enthusiastic.
Helpful.
To feel included.
Proud.
Safe.
Helping send people.
To make a positive change.
Feeling happy.
So I hope that video has helped you to see different ways that people's voice can be included in not only their own care plans, but also in systemic change. Recommendation 9 arose because of the different experiences of two participants. One was receiving a large amount of mental health support, yet the other was struggling to obtain the right support due to their dual diagnosis. This prevented the participant from being able to receive the appropriate mental health care due to them after a period of being detained, because they also had a dependency on alcohol. The updated quality assurance framework is already out for safeguarding boards. What are you doing to improve the accessibility of mental health services, particularly when there is a dual diagnosis? Recommendation 10 is around undertaking a larger scale audit. Despite the low number of people interviewed, these are important recommendations, but how do we increase the number of people we hear from? How do you engage with people who lack capacity? How do we get the views of people who have experienced trauma without causing further upset? How do you ensure participation stays central to everything that you do within your service? So I'd just like you to reflect on the main questions that arose from these recommendations and perhaps add your responses to the chat function. So on reflection, what have been your barriers to cases being closed? Are plans being reviewed regularly? And if not, why not? How often is your database and IT training refreshed? What are the barriers to professionals being curious? Why is there such a gap in support for prison leavers? How do you support young adults within your service as they continue into early adulthood? What are you doing to improve the accessibility of mental health services, particularly when there is a dual diagnosis? And how do you engage with people who lack capacity? So I'd like to play a video to you now, which was created by the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Victim and Survivor Group. So although this video relates to the experience of domestic abuse victims and survivors, it also reflects the experiences of service users across our safeguarding systems. I'd like to give a trigger warning because this can be quite upsetting to watch.
I just feel like there wasn't like a clear direction of where you go, what needs to be done.
Unless you have any help to recognize what you deserve and how to stay away from abuse, you can go through this again and again.
Having to repeat your story again and again and again, it's re-traumatizing.
So this kind of cycle of trauma that victims have to go through, and then you just find yourself straight back at the beginning again.
There are services and people that want to help. You can make it through and come out the other side.
It shapes who you are. It's built into the fabric of who you are as a person, and everything is coloured by it in some way. It's a presence that never leaves you. It's just part of you. It's part of your mind and your body and your reactions and who you are in the world and how you interact with it, how you interact with other people.
I think what we need is systematic change and stronger communities, stronger support systems and better services for people to be able to speak about these things without feeling shame.
You yourself as a professional can shut down because, it is quite traumatic to be witnessing on and hearing about those things. So I think the more we talk about it, the more those professionals can kind of keep up to date with the things that help. There are so many parts to domestic abuse. I think the biggest misunderstanding when it comes to domestic abuse is that one is that it's physical abuse, and two, that the person that is the perpetrator of the abuse is only somebody that you are in an intimate relationship with.
My personal experience is the psychological and emotional abuse has done far much more damage to me and my child than the physical abuse has.
Really just damaging my self-esteem and my confidence. He made me feel like I couldn't find a healthy relationship, and this was like the best I was going to get. And I felt like, as a single parent, he's probably right. I might as well just stay in this.
it distorts your view about what relationships are supposed to be like, and people don't realise that after going through the first time they're violent or controlling, that you don't just leave because you really think they love you. So in my mind, like, I'm not even sure what it's like having a healthy relationship or healthy love.
It's important to talk about this because I don't think the system understands that it needs to do more to help people find their way back again. It's not working. We can see it's not working.
I need help to get help. Where do I get the first help from? And who will care? Who will realise that I need and deserve a bit of their time to make my life less painful and help keep me alive? I struggle with a lot, too much emotional pain and intensity. Who gives enough of a crap to help me help me? Because you are not too different from I, and I bet you wouldn't want to wake up wishing you were dead and somewhere beyond the sky.
You literally pass between all these different agencies, and you're almost just asking one of them to do what they should be doing to stop that happening.
It's just trial and error. So you're literally phoning this place, that place, like on this website, on that website, like getting all these phone calls coming through, and sometimes you're forgetting who's from where and what they're supposed to be doing. Like it's crazy.
When you can't even cope with basic functioning like showering and getting food, like how are you supposed to suddenly take on like full-time admin stuff trying to get hold of services? And especially because at the time I was homeless, like I didn't even always have a phone with charger or anything.
The services just need to be a little bit more open with each other. You're constantly asked to go through all of your experience and your story repeatedly. I think for me, definitely, it would have been a lot easier if I hadn't had to go over everything every time I was passed to someone else.
I had times where I would spend an hour on the phone with them and they would do all these questions with me and then would just send me a message and say, actually, you don't fit here, like we can't offer you support, you need something else.
And I think that's, where a lot of the frustration comes from. We just want what we should be, entitled to, and that's just kindness and support. I've had police kind of put it back onto me, what would you like us to do? I felt like I had to be the one in charge of the situation, and I felt far from being capable of doing that at the time.
I felt like I was encouraged to report and then encouraged to prosecute, but then if you don't want to prosecute, they're kind of like, well, we'll log it, you're back on your own. I feel like there wasn't the right support at that time from the police.
The services should be having that role that if people are in need, or if they need someone, or they need an outside presence or someone to step in, or they should be that safe space. They should be able to offer that support.
Children's Services contacted me and asked to call me in for a meeting. They told me that if I left that I'd be protected, that he'd have to attend a perpetrator programme, that he wouldn't be able to take our son from me. And then after I left, 3 weeks after I left, they closed the case against him because they said that the abuse had been directed at me and therefore not my son. So everything was fine. There's very much focus on kind of, oh, you need to leave and everything will be fine once you leave. But unless like an abuser is dealt with there, they're just allowed or enabled by kind of systematic failure to just kind of carry on that cycle of abuse. So what's the point in leaving?
There are that coercive controlling behaviour that continues, especially if you've had a child with that person. Even going through the family courts, there's a constant battle, and I think that has taken its toll.
She undermined like police evidence, suggested that I'd lied and that Children's Services hadn't carried on with investigating him because they didn't believe me. And I got dragged through the most traumatic 5 hours of my life, like literally thinking, you're supposed to be protecting me.
There's so many people left on the sidelines that aren't able to access support, or they give up in despair, or they slip through the net because they don't fit. I think so many people are lost that way.
All this stuff happened 2 years ago, and I've just been appointed a counsellor. Imagine waiting almost 2 years after something so traumatic. I didn't have money to like pay for private therapy. I wish I did.
The long-term effects for me is I've got CPTSD, insomnia, anxiety, depression. I've been in 3 different areas trying to access support for domestic violence, and nowhere has had counselling, which is what all of us want, is one-on-one therapy, because obviously it leaves lasting effects.
When you're in a place of complete overwhelm or loss or isolation or darkness, that link with the outside world is vital. That sense that you matter, that you're seen within services. I've had people who have been that kind of anchor or that grounding presence.
The people that did things well were the ones that didn't question any of the things that I said, because a lot of really strange things can happen in abusive relationships, and that's something that's really hard to open up about.
I was scared to leave the house. I was scared to even put the rubbish outside. And I got passed over to a different support worker. She'd take it really serious and just give me little tips, like, you know, bring your phone out and just have it on 999. Anything that's going to make you feel safe. That was helpful.
I think it's really important for organisations to listen to the lived experience of people that are using their services and understanding when things aren't going right. If you know it's going on and you do nothing, then you're enabling it to continue.
I think if they had better communication lines between the different services and professionals, it wouldn't all be on us to have to explain everything that we've been through each time.
You feel like all of the weight is on the victim to make change, and the victim to change their life, to move house, to do all these things, but that the perpetrator is just allowed to carry on as normal. I feel like there needs to be much more focus looking at where the abuse has come from and how that should be dealt with.
I want to say to professionals that they need to believe people and take people seriously, and not just see it as a job, but see it as it can be life or death for people, and they don't need to always have the answers, but just to be there for people.
You can change this. You're part of it. You can make a difference in someone's life for the better. And listen to each person's story. Don't assume you know it. And each one deserves your support. Each person is as important as the other one.
These immense, painful, hurtful feelings inside come from things that happened out there. Services need to wake up and see that the innocent are dying. We need your attention and compassion now, because we as survivors are always trying. Domestic violence and abuse leaves marks not just on our skin, but truly deeply inside our brains and hearts.
Please, can you make sure that you look after yourself, and that if you have found that upsetting, please do take some time to step away. I would like to now hand over to Michelle Farr from the University of Bristol.
Thanks, Jen. So I don't know whether, Jen, you want to share the Slido sort of results now, just so we can see what's up there, and then I can kind of speak to those as well. Yeah, I will share some sort of evidence from various different bits of research around service user involvement and engagement. So the question we asked was, what barriers have you faced when including lived experience and user voice in your work? So perhaps not surprisingly, the 3 main ones that are coming up are resources, time, and communication. So those are kind of some of the key issues, and I guess you can see that from the other side from that video, the impact that also can sometimes have for people who are trying to navigate that system. So this is quite complex work in terms of how you meet those needs when staff are also facing difficulties in terms of those resources, the time and communication with the service users. So please keep putting into the Slido your thoughts on this. We've only got 8 respondents so far, and I can see there's 67 people on the in the call, so please do add. Would be really good to hear everybody's views, and also thanks so much for everything you've put in the chat function so far as well. So in your own time, Jen, if you could kind of go back to the slides, then I'll share a few details from various different research projects and resources that we have around sort of user involvement in safeguarding. So the first one of those is from the Social Care Institute for Excellence. So this is a resource, well, various resources. If you click on the link within this slide, when you get the slides, you'll be able to be taken to the resources page, and there's also a resources page at the end of these slides, so you'll be able to get all the links to these. But just to kind of highlight key issues that have come up within sort of user involvement within safeguarding. So there needs to be kind of greater recognition of kind of like within people's own sense of autonomy and independence, and there's this kind of difference between how professionals might perceive risks, and there might be some issues where people are sort of need to be risk averse, but actually there might be a difference between how service users themselves perceive risk and how professionals perceive risk. So there's kind of like there can be this mismatch within these approaches. So there's kind of needs to be that recognition of people's own autonomy and independence, but also supported to make decisions for themselves that are actually going to improve their lives. In terms of different service users, many people have different and diverse communication needs, so there needs to be kind of things to think through of how to best communicate and support people through that communication process. And I think communication was definitely coming up in the Slido, and I've just had another quick look, and yeah, there's some more. Keep on going. This is great. You've got a really nice sort of a wide range of issues coming up within this. There's so the Social Care Institute for Excellence were highlighting that there was a greater need for support and leadership from senior staff. So some of the issues here are around providing resources, support and training, and that's definitely come up in Jen's presentation as well, around the training that's needed for this to happen in practice, and I can see that as well in the Slido in relation to sort of support, training. Professional culture is also coming up here. So the sense that actually this is important work, is a rights-based approach. People have the right to be involved within safeguarding. Just a little bit on my background. My kind of core interest is around kind of co-production and involvement of lived experience. And when I've been working with people with lived experience of safeguarding, they've sometimes said that this was the hardest time to be able to get involved. It's almost like safeguarding can be done to people rather than there's actually any sense of involvement within those processes. So yeah, so there needs to be kind of more thoughtful and creative ways of engaging with people to meet their diverse needs. As I said, the kind of issues around risk are really important, and that can be quite different from how service users perceive risk within their everyday environment and a professional's perspective on risk. And then all of this takes time, energy and resources, which can be difficult within the current context within services at the moment. If you could move on to the next slide. Thanks, Jen. So Jeremy Dixon is a senior lecturer at the University of Bath, and he's recently written a book on safeguarding. Again, you can find a link to his book within that within the slides, and some of those chapters are free to download. So he was interviewing social workers and was exploring the reasons why people weren't able to involve service users within safeguarding processes. So some of the key elements that came across within the interviews was a need to establish immediate safety. So there was something that was presenting that needed immediate action, and that sometimes that made it difficult to then involve people. There was a sense from a lot of social workers that actually some of these conversations were very complex, very sensitive, and this might be particularly in cases with people with dementia, people who have learning difficulties, or there might be complex family dynamics. So there's a real feel for the need to have face-to-face assessments, but these could take time to organise. So that kind of sense of that communication is definitely still coming up as a high one within the Slido. So yeah, so time to be able to do that and think about people's specific communication needs is really important. Within some safeguarding instances, there was a sense of service user resistance as well to concerns that had been raised, particularly by professionals rather than service users themselves. So some social workers were finding that there was actually resistance to actually engaging in that process, particularly when it wasn't instigated by themselves. So here again, it's the importance of building relationships and trust with clients before these conversations could happen was really, really important. And as comes up on the Slido, limited time is a real issue, and how people can kind of keep on top of the referrals actually coming into the system to be able to engage people in the way that professionals might want to be able to. Thanks, Jen. If you could go on to the next slide, that would be great. So the Social Care Institute for Excellence have included various suggestions that might be able to help with some of this. So including service users' views in staff notes can be really important to make sure that you always have those conversations with people. I think something that would be really helpful and is to think about accessible information. So sometimes service users might be unaware of safeguarding processes, what happens when. Having some kind of generic accessible information outlets can be really helpful to help people think through about, well, what's going to be happening and when, what social workers do. So this is something that I think could be, these are quite sort of small, quicker wins, as it were, about how you can kind of actually start thinking through how you can sort of change some of this. So things around debriefing, so briefing before meetings, debriefing after meetings, really thinking through about what meeting format you're using. Is that accessible to the people that you're working with? Is there any kind of mentoring or advocacy that might be available to people? And then recognising that diversity of need, again, is really key. So using different organisations that people might be supported already by, and making it use of any independent advocacy where possible is also key. Other suggestions are around sort of developing support groups for people who've been through a safeguarding process. So having that kind of lived experience and peer support through safeguarding processes can be really key, so that people know what it's like from someone else who's actually had experience of that. And as Jen was talking about with the trustee group that she sort of developing at the moment, having actually direct representation of service users on safeguarding adults boards is really key as well. This all takes kind of support, training, capacity building for staff. So I think this is something where, again, And whereas the Bristol City Council is kind of keen to be sort of trauma informed, and there's trauma informed training that's currently available. So really kind of taking advantage of those training resources that are currently out there. And also within that, sort of involving service users as well in specific training can be really helpful, because you get to see sort of perspectives from all different sides. Thanks, Jen. And then this is a sort of brief sort of outline of different resources that are available. So there's Local Government Association, as I say, the Social Care Institute for Excellence, Jeremy Dixon's book where he was interviewing social workers. One thing, this is a piece of policy review that I just found this morning, actually, that I've asked Jen to add, which was the mental capacity, self-neglect and adult safeguarding practices. That's a policy briefing from the University of Bristol. I didn't have time to put some of those findings into the slides today, but that's also worth looking at. And then there's the Safeguarding Adult Review that Jen based her presentation on. And I think that's the next slide, the last one. Yes, final for sort of any further questions. And maybe we can also have another look at the Slido, because there's a few more inputs into that.
I can see in the chat that there aren't any questions on the chat, and some people have noted some response to the video from the Domestic Violence and Abuse Forum. So thank you for that. I say that there's a few more responses there. I can see that capacity is also sort of increased as well, and low responses. Thanks for doing this. It's really, really useful, and I think that we'll be able to share this going forward with the slides. So hopefully somebody is about to drop in the evaluation form into the chat for people to be able to do. As I said, it doesn't take that long, but they haven't done that as yet. So I just want to finish really, and we made a conscious effort to give you some time back at the end of the week so that you could go out for a cup of tea and go for a walk to give yourself some time. Oh, great, the evaluation is there now. So thank you all for attending the week of webinars, and more importantly, thank you for all the work you do across the numerous sectors across the region, working together to support individuals who have their voices heard and be safe. I hope on behalf of all of the group who've put these webinars together, they've been useful for you, and I hope your Friday afternoon is non-eventful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire.